above that. Yeah, I don't know where, on the piano it's all about middle. I don't know where it's all from this thing. So middle C is pretty much below the treble clef, everything above it. Bass clef is the opposite. Middle C is above it. So the second instrument I really learned was bass guitar, and that was bass clef. And bass guitar is actually written, not only is it written in bass clef, but it's written an octave above the actual pitch. So that way the notes are on the staff, and it makes it a little easier. And then there's another clef. Well, I've heard it described as a third clef or 5-bar clef. But basically, it's this funny looking thing in the middle. That's called a C clef. And it's only used for certain instruments. Like I've heard certain tenor parts and choruses are often written in C clef, and trombone parts are sometimes written in that way. And it basically, it allows you to specify which line, there are 5 lines in the staff. The C clef specifies which line is C. So it allows you to put up most of your notes on the staff. Because otherwise, you normally be between the two staffs. Okay. And then if you are above or below the staff, you use what are called ledger lines, which you'll see here. So this is the full piano staff. C is the ledger line between the two 5-line staffs. The treble clef is on top. The bass clef is on the bottom. I've labeled all the note names on the staff, and then you can see that the one in the middle, which would be above this one, so it's A, the space above the staff B, and then the first ledger line is C, and then above C is D, and then the next line is treble clef is E. If you're just playing a bass clef instrument, and you would just have the bass staff, and then you'd have multiple ledger lines if you play higher frequency notes. But piano typically has a treble and a bass clef, and typically they map to your right and left hands. Okay, the other names for things, I didn't go too into detail. A lot of these devices in music have multiple names. And I basically stuck to the one name that I know, but this is one time where I do use both names. Treble clef is also called G clef, and bass clef is also called F clef. And the reason why is you can see the treble clef kind of circles the G line. So if you need to, if you're given a piece of music and you need to write out what the note names are, or you need to know how to play them, and this might be on the midterm or something, that circle, this part here circles the G line, okay? So that's a mnemonic. And similarly, in bass, these two dots are on the F line. And you can see that the staffs are actually one line off from each other, right? Because here it's F-A-C-E in the spaces, and here it's A-C-E-G in the spaces. And so what we do now is we take the staff and we put notes on the staff. So what are our notes look like? We start off with the whole note. Now, again, there's probably a long history to how this notation came up. I didn't realize how much, how many different types of notes there were. I just recently found out about something called shape notes, which I've never heard of. But whole note is basically a circle, and what it indicates is roughly a whole measure. So if we're dealing with common time 4/4, it's 4 beats. It's a whole measure. That doesn't hold true in other time signatures, but it's a good way to remember when it does. The whole note drawn like an oval. Then we divide that in half and get half a note. So you get the oval, you put a line on it, you get a half a note. And that indicates that it's half of the full note, which is 2 beats in 4/4. The half note is, full note. Then we fill in the circle part, and that becomes a quarter note. And that is 1 beat in common time. Now most people, like I said, I talked to some musician friends, and they said they always start as the quarter note equals 1 beat. And you can think about it that way and think of the whole note as being the same as 4 quarter notes. That's fine. There's all different ways to look at it. I just thought it made sense to start with the whole note. Then basically we subdivide. Everything gets divided by a power of 2. So we have eighth notes, which you put a little flag on the quarter notes. Everything kind of evolves from what came previously. And then if you have multiple eighth notes, instead of drawing these fancy flags every time, you can just draw a line connecting them together. Then of course we get the 16th notes, 32nd notes. The highest I've ever seen is 128 notes, but you can create whatever you want. It all depends on the tempo. If you have a really slow tempo, which we haven't found yet, you can subdivide the beat as much as you want. Or if you're a really fast tempo, you probably will subdivide that. And again, you bridge. If you have 16th notes, you would bridge. You'd have 2 lines going across, and then you can also have things that are like say, pretend that note's not there. You could have an 8th, and then make these 2 a 16th. So you can do stuff like that. If you've seen music, you've probably seen these things. And again, I'll have to bring in some examples. Okay, so that covers the whole measure, half, quarter, eighth, all powers of 2. Well, what if we need something else that's like, say, 3/4 of a note, right? That's in between the whole note and the half note. That's where the dotted note comes in. Anytime you put a dot after a note, it extends the duration by 50%. So dotted half note, 150 times 2 beats, 3 beats. Dotted quarter note, 150 times 1 beat, is 1.5 beats. 1.5 beats. When you subdivide the beat, talk a little bit about it. The typical thing is there are, I guess, rhythms used. So if you're on the beat, you use the number, and if you're just up, if you're on the half beat, you say and. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And like there's some good examples where the accent is on the and it's very good to feel. And then, you can also, when you subdivide it in 16ths, it's usually 1 E and is the term they use. So that's how you can describe the 16th notes on the E. Okay. After dots are good, but they only give you one way of elongating the note, basically 150 times its duration. You can also tie notes together, and that'll give you any arbitrary duration, right? And to tie it, you just put a tie mark above it, which is basically a curved line. And so you can tie any string of notes together. And there's a little bit of a terminology difference. When you see that line above it, that it can either be a tie or a slur, right? So a tie means the notes are the same value. You're holding a note longer. A slur means you're moving from one note to another. And a slur basically moves in a more gradual way, where you can't really demonstrate on a keyboard. An easy way to understand a slur is if you look at like a woodwind or a brass instrument. When they first start, they do what's called tongue notes. So like if you're playing a reed as clarinet, your tongue would touch the reed, and then you let it go as you blow in, and that would be a very sharp attack sound. And then if you slurred, and so if you played a sequence of those notes, you press your tongue to the reed each time, and each note would come out as a separate instance, and there would be a momentary gap between each note, right, where your tongue touches the reed and stops the vibration. Well, when they're slurred, you just change the fingering without stopping the airflow. Okay, so that's a slurred note. A bend on the guitar where you bend the string, that's also a type of slur. Hammer-ons on a guitar can be considered a slur. Okay. So the nice thing about this is interesting too is you can